Not given, and it's also
It's never been
putting the squeeze. They make money on
excessive materialism and militarism. We know full well that racism is still that hound of hell.
Woody Allen was in it, and I was like, why are we watching? Why are we still watching things about Woody Allen?
I know. I used to be like a cinema studies kind of person, and so I love old Woody Allen movies, but I can't support it anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you want to say more about the Kevin Spacey thing that you knew about, so the world can know that Hollywood is complicit?
I will say that in the last couple of years, since Me Too has started, every theater company that I've worked for has we've had talks company-wide about if anything suspicious is happening, tell someone right away, because there is what do you call it? I don't know. They're not doing it. they're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
No more Kevin Spaceys. No more Louis C.K.'s.
Yeah,
around. I'm trying to push them out.
Louis
so
C.K. keeps trying to come back, and then we're like, we don't want you to come back. Stop.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, these are great artists that we once loved, but there's plenty of artists who aren't monsters.
Yeah.
Who deserve a shot. Artforum magazine recently, I don't know if you'd follow, their publisher for the last 30 years recently has been outed. I don't know the details internally, although I do know people who work over there, so I've kind of heard a little bit. But yeah, he, I guess for the last 30 years has been preying on interns. And, it was mostly inappropriate touching and, rude comments and stuff like that. But pretty predatory. And apparently this has been reported for years, but it was reported to one of his partners, the publishing partners, and he just, squashed it or, covered it up. And so there's plenty of people in the company who wouldn't stand for that sort of thing, but they just didn't know.
Right.
No one ever told them. So they've been dealing with the fallout for that for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever directly experienced anything like that in your tenure in theater or the art world?
Oh man, not in theater.
Not in theater. That's good.
It happened to me once when I think I was 14. I had gone to Comic-Con in Orlando, MegaCon, just a big famous one.
Yeah.
And I was in line to get tickets to go in, and it was me and my friends, and I was the only Asian-looking kid. And this older man, at the time, I don't know how old he was, probably in his 30s, but to me he looked like he was in his 50s, singled me out and was like, sorry, are you Asian? And that's such an odd question because obviously I am, just by looking at me.
Yes.
So I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, okay. Then he walked away. I thought that was super weird.
That is super weird.
Came back a couple minutes later and was like, are you full Asian?
Why is this happening?
Right. And so that's what's going through my mind.
I'm shaking right now.
Right. And so I knew enough at that point to be like, oh, this is creepy and weird. And this is an experience I've never had before. Always answer questions honestly. So it was like, well, I'm half Asian.
Yes. Which is what you said to me when I cornered you in a stairwell. That sounds really creepy on my part too, but that's how we met. So we met in a stairwell.
So I told him that my dad's white, my mom's Thai. He's like, oh, cool. And he walks away. And I thought, oh, that's the end of that. It seems pretty innocuous. And he came back.
Oh my gosh, I'm literally shaking right now, and I'm trying not to.
And he asked me how old I was, and I was like, I'm 14. He's like, okay, how much alcohol would it take for you to come up to my hotel room with me and my girlfriend? And
what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. What the fuck? What is that? And I was just like, no.
Yeah.
Number one, as a kid, I was a straight edge person. I mean, sober, straight edge, whatever. But I didn't do drugs or drink or anything like that. So like obviously that wasn't going to be, in my future. But also, even if I was not going to go to this hotel room with this creep.
Yeah. And also, how does he think that works?
Right.
Or did it work for him?
Yes, because I met up with another friend of mine who's a Filipino kid, and apparently the dude had asked him the same thing. Like later on in the afternoon, my friend Michael went up to his hotel room with him and his girlfriend and like hung out with him. Apparently the dude wanted him to like make out with his girlfriend and play DDR.
I'm horrified right now. Yeah.
So I don't think anything like too, horrible happened, but I mean, clearly it could have. He said yes. Why?
Why did he say so he was 14, right?
He was a little older than me. I think he may have been 16.
Still a child.
Exactly.
And this is what I was saying earlier about Drake and Millie Bobby Brown.
Yeah, so I missed that. I don't know what that is.
Oh my God. Everyone stop listening to Drake. No, but basically Millie Bobby Brown, she's a child.
Yes.
She's 13 or something.
No contest. She is a child.
She is a child. And she said in this interview, like a child would, she was just like, oh, it's like cool. Drake and I are like really good friends. He texts me like relationship advice and tells me he misses me. We're just really good friends.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's not your friend. And then Drake, what is Drake doing? Texting this little girl and clearly grooming her. But like people don't seem to talk about that. Same with like R. Kelly. I mean, now people are talking about R. Kelly.
That whole thing, I don't understand, like how we've gone so long. I have never liked R. Kelly, because clearly he's a predator,
It's just so many things.
Cognitive dissonance, I guess.
I know. I should probably introduce you after this really intense conversation. I didn't mean for it to go there, but thank you for sharing. Today, I'm actually joined by Aaron. Thank you so much for sharing those stories, Aaron. Aaron Amodt is a Floridian who most at home in the swamp, but will settle for a humid summer in New York. He started out doing pyro for SeaWorld and Ringling Brothers Circus, but now builds sets in downtown NYC. As technical director, GATS, Elevator Repair Service, Everyone's Fine with Virginia Woolf, Elevator Repair Service, Objects in Mirror, AR Closer Than They Appear, Sensorium, MS Estrada, The Flea, Phil, The Flea, A Billion Nights on Earth, Lucidity, Suitcase Intercontinental. Other credits, Othello, New York Theater Workshop, Lazarus, New York Theater Workshop, The Select, Elevator Repair Service. Find his theater photography at www.aaronamodt.com. IG at Amodt Tech. And Amodt is spelled AMODT. And I didn't know how to pronounce that at first. And this is Now in Color, the podcast that brings those who have been erased from history back to the forefront. And I'm your host, Sandie. And we just had a really intense conversation, but I'm really grateful for it too.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that Comic-Con story until I was on tour recently with Elevator Repair Service, and one of the company members asked me about like being fetishized as an Asian person, and I remembered that one. And it's like, I think the worst and probably like the only time that it's been like in a really creepy way that's happened to me. Other times just been, like friends of mine who, microaggression type thing, like they don't know they're doing it, but it comes out.
But they're doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it's really interesting that you bring that up, because it's usually from Asian women's perspective of being fetishized and like all this like yellow fever, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But this is actually even my first time personally hearing it from another Asian man.
Really?
Yeah. And I think in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm sure it exists, but because it's happened to me and my Asian women friends so frequently, I'm like, oh, it's just Asian women. But like, we never hear about it, even in like media or any art or books. It's always just like, and this like exotic Oriental girl and things like that. I've never really heard stories from my friends, Asian male friends, who talk about being fetishized by
actually, it just reminded me of something else. I've only ever been to Thailand once when I was 17. It was so funny. Everywhere we went, all the locals clocked me as being a Hapa.
Interesting.
Half Asian.
Yeah.
All of them immediately recognized me, and they like flocked to me, take pictures, because they love half white, half Thai men.
Why?
specifically.
Why is that?
Who knows? Like, it was not brought up that culturally close to, the Thai side of my family. So I don't really know. But they are really friendly to Americans there. So maybe like there's something to that. Like they fetishize white people there,
That's interesting.
That's a generalization. I don't know if that's true, but it seemed to be the case.
Because I was telling you when I found out you were half Norwegian, I was saying that one of my friends, she's Norwegian, she's from Norway, she was telling me that there is a phenomenon, I don't even know if that's the right word for it, that older Norwegian men frequently have mail order brides from Thailand.
Right.
And I was wondering if you had heard of that, because I'm not saying your parents are that, obviously.
They definitely are not.
Yeah. But yeah, I was wondering if that had ever affected you in any way.
I mean, yeah, people assume that.
Yeah.
About my family a lot. And I have some other cousins. Actually, pretty much all of my Thai cousins, the exception of a few of them, are half, or biracial or, whatever. And I think they probably get that too. Because, like a cousin of mine, she's half white, half Thai. But she was in the military and she ended up marrying a black guy and has a bunch of kids. But people assume that the military thing and being mixed race is like, like a white GI goes over to Vietnam, picks up an Asian bride and comes back. And they assume that about me and like all of my cousins, which is not the case at all.
And it's a really unfair generalization too.
But I do know people who that is their story, and like that was the only way out of horrible war, and like it saved their lives. Yeah. So
the only story that I know just from the personal backgrounds is when the Vietnam War was happening, there were military bases, U.S. military bases in Taiwan, which is where my family is from. My mom would say that Taiwanese women would want to run away with these like American soldiers because in their minds it was just like, oh yeah, we're gonna live in like New York or California or just somewhere cool, And then come to find, they go to America and they're like living in Montana. And she was saying that a lot of women would actually leave their husbands and just come back and be like, oh, that was really boring. That was not what I expected. But yeah, it's like a really unfair generalization to say that like, oh, all biracial children are like from wars and like, and mail order brides.
And the thing is, it's a lot of times there's a tone where it's like you're the product of spoils of war. Like you're a prize that has been brought back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that is the part that, upsets me the most about it, because it's fine, like going overseas as a soldier and falling in love there and, moving back here. Or, in some cases, people end up moving, or Americans move to Thailand and live there. But it's more often than not characterized as bringing home a souvenir.
Yeah, and also Asian women belong to someone. The idea that Asian women can't choose to fall in love with a white soldier or like whoever. Tell me more about your experiences with the Ringling Brothers and working in the circus. That is so fascinating to me just from a historical perspective, because a lot of actually the first Asian people to come to America were circus freaks, quote unquote, and they were from Thailand, and they were the original Siamese twins because of Siam. So I'm so interested in this parallel right now, and like, what was it like working in a circus? And I've never met anyone who's worked in a circus. So
before I do that, I should ethnic background is my mother is half Chinese, half Thai, and she's from Bangkok. And my dad, he's from Chicago, and he is Italian, Polish, and half Norwegian. And the Italian part of my family, apparently when they came over in the 1880s, ended up joining a traveling circus as musicians.
That's so cool.
Which I found out after I had joined the circus.
That's so cool.
Right?
I'm just like, how does that happen with families where it is this something in our DNA that like drives us towards certain
It clearly
routes.
must be. And so my dad's a stagehand. Grew up backstage. Although he mostly did like sound and video and lighting and stuff, and I was more involved with set building and that sort of thing. So, you know, our paths diverged a little bit, but yeah, I'm just a product of everything that has come before me, you know.
Yeah.
But I ended up with Ringling. I had worked at SeaWorld for a few years as a pyrotechnician doing the nightly fireworks show.
Wow.
And then once I graduated college, I decided I had had enough of Florida.
I've never been to Florida.
It's great.
I want to go to Harry Potter World.
Yeah. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter is great.
I want to go there.
A friend of mine is... well, he used to be a manager over there, but I think he does something else in the park now. But yeah, it's awesome. You should go when you have the chance.
Okay, I will. Live all my dreams.
But I left Florida. I packed all my stuff in a pickup truck and I moved to a warehouse in Clarksville, Tennessee.
Interesting.
Where all my friends were living. You know, there's like piles of mattresses and, you know, broken bikes and stuff. And we just like lived there as a like artist collective making art. And I had built a dark room in the corner and was doing photography stuff. But then I had gotten a call from a friend of mine who I worked at SeaWorld with doing pyro. She was working with the Ringling Brothers. A spot had opened up because their lighting board op had a nervous breakdown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, sweet. I should do that. Not realizing that maybe it had been a warning sign.
Yeah. I would be like, why did he have that nervous breakdown?
So I packed all my stuff back in the truck. This is like a month after I had moved there.
Yeah.
And I drove back down to Florida and moved all my stuff into an RV. And then I ended up on tour with them for 3 years. We were in a new town every week.
Whoa. What is that like?
It's awesome. The thing is, Ringling operated 3 tours at that time. There's 2 that traveled the East Coast and 1 on the West Coast via a train. And they were the longest privately owned trains in the world. And the entire crew and animal compound and train crew and all the support staff live on the train. I think there's anywhere between 300 and 500 people involved.
On the train?
Yeah.
Wow. This is like not as intense, but Snowpiercer.
Yeah. No, it's very similar to that. I didn't get a chance to do a train tour. I was on the RV and truck tour.
Oh, okay.
Which was great in its own way because we were a single ring circus, and we traveled to all the places that the trains couldn't get to.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're small towns in rural Illinois and Montana and Nevada and all over the place.
Yeah.
It was great. So I got to see all of this part of our country that tourists don't go to because there's nothing there. Like we went to a bunch of coal mining towns where people had a lot of money from working in the mines, but there wasn't anywhere to spend it because there was no infrastructure in the towns. So when the circus rolled up, they just blew their whole wallet, you know, in like 2 days on merch, snow cones, cotton candy, you know, stuff like that. Then you get to meet these people and they're so thrilled that anything, you know, was coming to town. And, you know, you'd be walking the street and they would, because we're in small towns, they would instantly know that you were with the circus because you weren't one of the local people.
Yeah.
You know? Not just the way you look, but just because they knew everyone. And more often than not, they would invite us to come hang out with them, or, you know, they would sometimes give us free drinks at the bar, or, you know, like I had gone to so many house parties in college towns that were awesome as a result of that, because at the time I also had a handlebar mustache and a mohawk, so like I looked
Aaron.
like a freak.
I want you to bring that look back. That's such a cool look, and I can imagine it on you too. Do you feel like that changed your perspective of America?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
My family is very liberal. Very, like, most of them have come from Chicago and then moved down to Orlando, Florida, like 2 very blue places. So I never really had to butt up against the other side, you know?
Yeah.
But I had to do that a lot on the road. But the thing is, when you're insulated in, you know, like a blue city, blue county, blue district, you don't ever really meet those people, and you don't ever really learn what their needs are and what their life is like, especially in rural areas. They want the same things that my side does.
Yeah.
But the access to media and other services are lacking in a lot of those places. So, you know, you only know as much as, you know, has been told to you. And it seems to be that way, that like in, you know, the flyover states and, you know, out west, they just aren't getting the information. You know, education is around, but, you know, it's not as comprehensive. But we all like to have barbecues and go to the bar, and, you know, I love driving trucks and stuff like that. So, I mean, we all enjoy the same stuff, but I don't know. I like it out there.
Did you ever feel like being half Asian, did you ever feel like that ever came up in conversations?
Never. Once.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it does. Like, when I get close to people, they ask, you know, like, is it rude if I ask, you know, where you're from? And I'll tell them that I'm from Florida, and they're like, that's not what I meant. I'm like, I know what you meant.
Yeah, I play that game. I play that game too. I'm always just like, well, Riverside, California. And they're like, no, where? I'm like, well, I was born in Monterey Park Hospital in California.
But, you know, having a Norwegian last name really throws people off because it's non-recognizable as like a white name, but also it's not like a Chinese name. So no one really knows what to make of it. So they tiptoe a lot around it, which, you know, is, I guess, good for me.
Yeah.
Makes it a little easier to soften the blow that I'm also one of them, you know?
Yeah. Did that experience ever come into play during 2016 election when everyone was just like, we got to build bridges and like talk to the other side and things like that? Because I had a very visceral, angry response of like, I'm not talking to anyone. I'm done with that. I was so angry. I was angry for a really, really long time.
You know, I was too.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that, you know, we should talk to each other. I was convinced that the Dems were going to win, but I shouldn't have been because I go camping every summer out in, you know, wherever is within driving distance to New York.
Camping, but yes.
And that summer I had been in rural Pennsylvania. And you can't walk 2 feet without seeing a Trump sign.
Really?
Yeah. And, you know, it's like farmers for Trump, miners for Trump, you know, it's like signs everywhere. And I should have taken that as a sign. You know? Like these pictures aren't getting out into the newspapers on the internet because like no one goes out there.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you? Like one of the places we went was in Centralia, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Never heard of this place.
It was I think it's a coal mining town. And there was a fire there in the 70s, and it's been burning underground ever since. They had to abandon the town because of all the toxic fumes that were coming out. That kind of thing exists out there where there's not a whole lot of infrastructure, and there certainly wasn't a whole lot of safety, you know, back in the day. So these places are just kind of desolate and abandoned now.
Yeah.
And those people feel like they're forgotten, and they are. And I understand why they're angry.
Yeah.
Because no one is addressing their need.
Not even Trump.
Right, exactly. And that's the problem.
Yeah. Even a lot of people in Brooklyn voted for Trump. Mostly Orthodox Hasidic Jews.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? Why did that happen? But we don't have to talk about that anymore.
I know. I can feel my blood pressure rising.
Yeah, I'm sweating. Like, I'm so anxious talking about Trump. I can't watch the news anymore. I literally just start, like, panic attacks happen. But this is a great segue for your historical topic, because you were in the circus, but you also brought someone close to the circus as well, right?
I am really into late 19th century, early 20th century history, especially like showbiz. And so I'd known this story for a little while, but I hadn't really gone deep into the research about it until a couple of weeks ago. But there's this Chinese stage magician who was really successful at the time, surprisingly, because even nowadays, you don't really see anyone that is not a white male on stage performing magic, you know. I think that's changing, though. I hear that there's a lot more women, you know, taking on the role of being the magician and not just the assistant. I haven't seen it yet, but I hear that is on the horizon. Like, you know, you go to magic stores and there's a lot more 12-year-old girls picking up magic tricks and stuff.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I know. I'm really stoked about that, but, you know, we'll see what happens.
My reference to magicians is in Arrested Development, where Job is like, my illusions.
So I am not a magician. As a 12-year-old boy, I was really into it, so I learned a few tricks and had my own stage show. Me and my brother actually performed together. He was my assistant. He's younger.
What were your stage names?
It was just Austin and Aaron.
Oh, okay.
we weren't that, you know, clued into the show business yet. I was very serious. You know, I was a very dramatic child, you know, which works now because I work in theater.
Yes.
And he was a ham.
Like a ham? Like a thing you eat?
No. He just soaked in attention. You know?
Okay.
Like he was the clown on stage.
Yes.
So I would be performing an illusion, and he would have to, you know, either flip a thing or, you know, replace a thing under a cloth, you know, whatever the effect was going to be. But he would like deliberately undermine me.
Whoa, there's like drama
to make
already.
The trick fail. And he would just be laughing behind my back. And of course, I'm facing the audience. I don't know what's happening back there. The audience could see that he's like...
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah. And the audience thought this was funny.
Oh, yeah. They laughed like crazy, which pissed me off even more because it was a very serious routine.
Yes. So you were like Job in Arrested Development.
Yeah, basically. So I hung up my top hat and, you know, my
gave
wand,
up the magic life.
But I am still very interested in the history of it. And so there's this Chinese performer named Ching Ling Foo. This is his stage name. He's born in 1854 in Peking, and he didn't actually start practicing magic until he was 30. That's when he started learning about it. But he was like a roustabout. He did like shipping stuff around the Pacific. But it was doing that he was able to work in, you know, theaters and bars and saloons all across the Pacific. And so that actually spread his reputation pretty wide. And then at the time, I think he was in his 50s, he decided to do it full time. And he developed this whole stage act where he employed his family and a troupe of Chinese acrobats. And then he actually first performed in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places in the U.S. And he did like a 4-month stint there. At the Omaha Exposition, which is like the World's Fair, in 1898, I think is what it was. But his act, let me read off the kind of things that he did. He would produce objects from under a cloth on stage, including a 90-pound bowl of water.
How?
Right. A dish of walnuts, a live chicken, a live lamb, a lit oil lamp, a live goldfish, his 2-year-old daughter.
Oh my God.
A barrel-sized container of milk, a tub of water with swimming ducks in it, and a pitcher of water that endlessly poured.
That's so cool. I'm all about stage magic, so I will just like be like, how did this happen? It's so cool.
There's also another interesting trick that he did, and this is actually, I'm gonna read from a newspaper article from 1899, the New York Dramatic Mirror, June 3rd. He actually was performing at the Union Square Theater, which was just recently demolished a couple of years ago. But he did a 4-week run there, sold out houses. It says here, Ching also has a wonderful fire-eating trick, which is so difficult that he only does it twice a week, as it is very rough on the throat. In this performance, he fills his mouth with sawdust until his cheeks bulge out. Then he lights some Chinese punk. I don't know what that is.
What is that? Yeah.
And then eats it, after which he drinks a glass of water. Then he proceeds to blow immense clouds of smoke and flashes of flame from his mouth, and at intervals spits out balls of fire. After that, he calmly proceeds to draw from his mouth several yards of tissue paper, which is entirely unharmed by the fire, and as a climax, he spits a big lump of fire into a tin box filled with firecrackers, which go off with loud reports, bringing his great act to a noisy finish. That's awesome.
That is so cool. That's something I want to watch right now.
Right. So that is his act, but he also had like opening act and, like intermission act, which included his wife who had bound feet, who, I guess she just walked across the stage or held
That's
things
like
and standing up.
Right, exactly. Boy, the Chinese lady. Except she was in like a box, I think, like literally.
Well, I think that she actually was like his tour manager, also. So she had a dual role there at least. And his son did juggling and acrobatic acts on stage too. He worked for a very long time all around the world. And a lot of the articles I read, he performed for European diplomats around China, and then in the US he toured around all the vaudeville circuit. Oh, so interesting. The Omaha, Nebraska, the authorities tried to deport him.
I actually wanted to ask that. Was this during the Chinese Exclusion Act?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And so they tried to deport him, but he successfully argued for himself and his entire crew that they were not laborers, they were artists, and the judge let them stay.
I was going to say, did he disappear in front of their eyes? That would have been cool too.
But it was because of that he decided to stay in the U.S. and, live here for decades after that.
Where did he live? Where was his base?
It seems to be New York, but I'm not sure where exactly. But here comes the controversy.
Oh no. Always happens.
With his popularity, he decided to, as most magicians did at the time, put out a declaration that he would give $1,000 to any magician who could reproduce his tricks. And there was a magician in New York who could, and then Ching welched on the bet. And this is actually at the Union Square Theater. He had locked all the doors and hid inside the theater for days while this guy was out front in Union Square, saying that this guy owes me $1,000. So what happens is this guy steals his name. So, Chinese magician, his name is Ching Ling Foo. The other guy, hang on, I have it here, I don't want to get it wrong, is Ching Ling Soo.
Interesting.
White guy.
Oh, God.
In Yellowface, who speaks in Chinese gibberish.
Oh my God. That's like when Lindsay Lohan spoke in Arabic, I think.
Yeah.
Recently. Quotes.
So he stole his entire act.
But at this point, didn't Ching Ling Foo have like notoriety? Didn't people know?
But people couldn't tell them apart.
Oh my God. How? How?
Because of racism, I guess.
God.
But the horrible part is that what is his real name? William Ellsworth Robinson. William Robinson actually had a lot more success because he knew all the prejudices and biases against Chinese people that white people had, and he played into that, doing caricatures
of course he
of
did.
Chinese performers. And so people fucking loved it and sold out houses around the world. And so he did this act for like 20 years. And then he included his own, spins on it and new acts and new tricks and stuff like that.
Then what happened to Ching Ling Foo?
Well, he kept performing.
Yeah.
And so Ching Ling Foo would go to, I think he performed in Vienna for a long time, and then in Paris, and then in London, and everywhere he went, Soo would follow him.
Oh my God.
And do the same kind of marketing.
Yeah.
And, be at a rival theater just down the block,
Wow.
Yeah. For years this went on until the bullet catch trick.
Oh my God, what is that?
So this is a famous, dangerous trick that there's been different forms of it for centuries. But the main idea is that the magician who's on stage, and he has a bullet in his hand, and he invites someone from the audience to sign their name on it and load it into a pistol. And the assistant will fire the pistol at the magician on the other side of the stage. The magician will catch the bullet either in his hand or in the baseball glove or in his teeth, as I've seen it done recently. I think Penn and Teller do it. They catch it in their teeth. And has killed a lot of magicians.
I could imagine. Yeah.
And, there's different ways of pulling off the effect, which is, there's like a secret chamber in the pistol where the bullet falls into it. So when you fire it, it just fires the gunpowder, but not the actual bullet. There's other ways where, you can palm the bullet and pretend that you're putting it in the gun and then actually have an assistant walk it across the stage and put it in the pocket of the magician, things like that. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but the way that William Robinson did it is it was a real pistol with real gunpowder, but what would happen was the bullet would actually drop into a fake chamber once you held it up and were about to fire it. Well, he never cleaned his gun.
Always clean your guns.
Right. And
I I don't know. I've never even touched
and
it.
so like the buildup over years of doing this trick, gunpowder is still dangerous, is still alive, it's still flammable in the gun, and enough of it can light. And I guess what had happened was the bullet that was in that secret chamber, there was enough gunpowder to actually push it out of that chamber into the chest of William Robinson on stage.
Oh my God.
During the act, and he falls to the ground and he screams out, "I've been shot, lower the curtain," in perfect Brooklyn accent. And for 20 years, he's been pretending that he doesn't speak any English, speaking it in Chinese gibberish. And he's had an interpreter, an actor, his spokesperson, interpret for him in interviews and on stage for decades at this point.
Wow.
And so this has revealed his greatest illusion, which is him being a Chinese person.
What?
On stage. No one knew. Nobody knew except for his crew.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that revealed it for everyone that he was just a white dude in Yellowface all this time. And, he died the next day. But yeah.
I mean, poetic justice. I mean, I should never celebrate a person's death.
You're right.
Also, I kind of deserve it.
And, after that, Ching Ling Foo, God, it's so confusing. He still performed after that, but he never had the success that he did in earlier years, mostly because he was getting older and he couldn't hold a 90-pound bowl of water underneath the cloth anymore.
Yeah.
And he ended up passing away a few years after this whole thing, ended. But yeah, that's the story. And I actually went to the New York Historical Society a few months ago where they had this whole exhibit on stage magic that was like personal pieces from David Copperfield's collection. And there was a box, I guess, a glass case filled with memorabilia from this rivalry specifically.
Yeah.
Which is so cool to see.
Such an epic rivalry, too.
Yeah.
And to think that he passed away shortly after. I'm just like, his arch nemesis probably fueled him. That's crazy. I mean, I'm still just so surprised no one can tell the difference. But then again, the whole, oh my God, what is her name? Rachel Dolezal, right?
Oh, yeah.
I guess she pretended for a while, too, and got away with it.
Right.
So maybe I shouldn't be so surprised.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still happening now, I think, probably, especially with Rachel, whatever her last name is. I can't remember.
Yes.
But it was much easier to fool audiences in the 19-teens.
Yes, for sure. Wow, I'm just like blown away by this whole story. That's so cool. And how did you first learn about this?
So I have an interest in old magic and old circus and old vaudeville stuff. And so I read a lot of histories about this. And at that time, magic was like one of the big art forms at the time. They didn't really have rock stars or anything like that. So like if you were going to be a celebrity, it was either you could like sing opera or you could do Shakespeare or you could be a stage magician, basically, is like the three options, or circus. But usually like in circus you're up on a high wire, no one ever sees your face, sort of thing. So these rivalries happen all over the place. Okay. And so this famous magician, Robert Houdin, which Houdini actually gets his name from. Robert Houdin was a magician in the mid-19th century. He's French, and he like changed the rules on stage magic from that point on. Because before that, everyone dressed as wizards and did like, alchemical style illusions on stage. And he was like, well, I mean, you can do that, but wouldn't it be better if you just dressed like the people attending your shows? So it looked like you were just a regular guy and you could produce cards out of nowhere. Or, he had this famous trick. It was a tree on stage that was like hand cranked. It was like a clockwork thing, and it produced oranges out of nowhere. Like they just grew on stage. And so number one, it's a pretty cool magic illusion, but also it was such a great achievement in automation and robotics that he was like, what do we call it, a polymath, like he had his hands in a lot of different departments.
This is so
he was such a genius. Yeah, so he was the guy who was like, you should dress in a tux, top hat, tails, because that's what your patrons are going to be dressed like when they come to the theater.
Did Ching Ling Foo also dress in that way?
No, he dressed in traditional Chinese.
Really?
At the time. Yeah, I actually have a picture here.
I'll put this on social media.
There
too.
he is with Houdini.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And
so he met Houdini too.
Yeah, he actually preceded Houdini, and Houdini actually was not a very good magician. As I've come to find out, he actually was like mediocre at best. People didn't come to his shows to see him do magic tricks. They came to see him almost die on stage. Like that was the thrill. They were like, is it going to happen this time?
Is he the guy that like does... I don't know magic very well, except for like Chris Blaine, right?
His famous thing was he could break out of any handcuffs, any chains, any whatever. He would get inside of milk cans, and they would be padlocked. And they'd be filled with water, and he'd be in a straitjacket, and he would get free from the straitjacket and break the padlock from inside somehow, and he would pop out at the back of the house in the audience, dripping wet. And, the straitjacket in one hand, padlock in the other, like that was his thing. He could escape from anything. And he actually would go around from town to town, and he would put an ad in the newspaper saying that he was going to break free from the local jail. He would have the police chief lock him up, and he would escape in like 2 minutes, things like that. Yeah.
He is like David Blaine, right? Is that the
he
one?
does that kind of thing where it's like he also does magic, and David Blaine I think is pretty good, but like his thing is like stunts. Right. So
what did you think about that movie, The Prestige? That's the only movie that I could think of.
Ching Ling Foo is featured in that.
Is he?
Briefly.
Oh.
There is a portrayal of his act with the water bowls under the cloth and a Chinese magician doing it.
Never knew that.
Yeah.
Because I honestly didn't love that movie.
Yeah.
I just knew Christian Bale was in it. I was like, I guess I should watch it because he's a good actor. But I didn't love it. But
it's all right. I mean, I thought
know.
it was going to be more about like, a period piece about stage magic, but it's a little bit different than that.
Yeah, I think that's why I was thrown off, because I was like, I do like magic. I was super into Harry Potter at the time, so all things magic.
Oh, so
I was into it.
At the New York Historical Society, I was there. I was the only one under age 70 that was there at the time. And, me geeking out over all this stuff that I've seen in pictures for years, but here it is in the flesh right in front of me.
Yeah.
And then old posters and old props, decks of cards and Houdini's milk can that he, got dunked in, and taking pictures. And there's a guy who's like oddly close to me taking pictures of like the same thing, so I like step away, and then I look over and it's David Copperfield. This is me and him looking at Houdini's stuff, and he's like taking video of it. But the thing is, this is David Copperfield's personal collection. Why is he hanging out in this room with just me taking video of his own crap?
Yeah.
that he helped curate this whole thing. Anyway, that was like, I was starstruck. I didn't say hi or anything. I was just like frozen.
I never know how to interact with famous people.
Yeah.
I just don't. My last interaction was with Josh Groban.
Uh-huh.
I was like 15 and I went to a concert, and I was also like the youngest person there because it's for like middle-aged women, his concert.
Yeah.
And he like came down in a line, and like my cousin's now husband went with me because he was in San Diego at the time, and my cousin was like, take my little cousin to see Josh Groban because no one else will. And he hated the whole thing, but it was fine. And Josh Groban was coming down to, sign posters. And I could not contain this fangirl moment where I just screamed at his face. I just said, Josh, please give me a hug. And he was like, oh, okay. And he was so nice about it. But now looking back, I'm like, that's crazy. Never do that again.
I have I'm not going to name names, but I did a show a couple years ago with someone who is quite big right now, and she was getting direct messages on Instagram from Josh Groban. They'd never met in person before, but he was like,
scandal.
Yeah, he was like blowing up her inbox.
Oh my gosh. What? Saying what? Because he has this like.
He wasn't.
Nice.
He wasn't creepy. He was like.
Wasn't creepy.
No. He was just like, I really like what you do, and like maybe we should go hang out together sometime.
My heart is breaking. And I'm like, I've never met this guy. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I thought
funny.
he was dating someone.
I don't know. This is like 2016, so.
Oh, when he was doing. Oh,
he
God.
was on Broadway
what is that
or something
show?
like that. Right?
Comet. That Great Comet. The Great Comet.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yes, which I did go see for the sole purpose of seeing Josh Groban. And I was back to being 16. I was just like, oh my God. I didn't love that show either. It was very long, but it's okay. Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to see it, but I worked on the other show from the same creators.
What was the other
Hades
show?
Town.
Oh, I didn't watch
which
that.
I believe is going to Broadway soon, maybe this year. All the whole creative crew, I love them.
Yeah.
And they're amazing. And yeah, everyone should go see their work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Josh Groban, who's sliding into DMs apparently.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're all human.
I can only confirm that one time, so I don't know if he does that to a lot of people, but
Yes. My heart breaking. This reminds me of the conversation. We don't have to talk about it since we're all so close in the theater world, but
Yeah.
I've definitely talked about it on this podcast, which was comfort women.
oh my God.
Yes.
I forgot we had to talk about that.
We don't have to talk about it.
I would like to talk about it because
Okay.
I'm embarrassed by the whole thing. To say that I'm not Korean, I'm not Japanese,
I'm
so I
neither,
don't have a
too.
dog in this fight. But it was the worst piece of theater I've seen in years.
Yes.
And I'm sorry to everyone that I'm friends with on Facebook who was in that show and who was, on the creative team, but that was not good. And yeah, stop promoting it, please.
Are they still promoting it?
I don't know. I think there's a chance it may move somewhere else, but
Oh, no.
so I was covering for a friend of mine. He had to go out of town, and he was the lighting board operator for that show. And he's like, "Hey, can you cover for me for 2 weeks?" I said, "Sure." It was about to go on tour, so I hadn't really booked any work at that time, so just gonna take it. And those kind of gigs are really easy. You just show up and you make sure all the lamps are on, and then you just hit the go button when the stage manager tells you. You never have to look at what's happening on stage. You don't have to know anything about the story or anything like that. It's literally just hit the button when the person in charge says hit the button. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was going to be that. First, I'm going to talk about all the technical stuff.
Yeah, go for it.
Like the set was built by a couple from Cincinnati, I think. Yeah, which they could have found people in New York to do that job, locals, but whatever, who had never built a set before. They were lighting people, lighting and sound people. So I walk in, and I am a technical director. My job is to build sets and make sure they're safe for actors. Well, they had walls tilting down. They had walls spinning around on hinges. They had this piece of floor come up on a hydraulic
I don't remember that at all.
hydraulic lift in the middle of the stage in a blackout with a bunch of actors. Like, I think there's like 20 people in that cast. This is all dangerous.
Yes.
Dangerous, especially built by amateurs who, you know, like, come on.
Yeah.
And so my first day, and I was just supposed to be there for lights. There's this drawbridge that comes down.
I like don't remember. I honestly had like an out of body experience during this show.
Yeah. I mean, that was my experience through a lot of it too. But so there's this drawbridge. It must have weighed like 200 pounds. And it's on the thinnest steel cable that you can get because the director didn't want to see the cables, right? But those cables were not rated for that much weight, and they broke
Oh my God.
during the show.
Whoa.
Fortunately, it was the finale.
Yeah.
And it just has to go down once, and then it stays down. But if anyone was underneath that, they could have really been hurt.
Yeah.
And it did actually really hurt the poor stagehand backstage,
Yeah.
who probably weighed like 120 pounds, who flew up in the air because when the cables broke, the rope went up into
my
the air because it
God.
was all counterweighted. Yeah, and his hand ended up going into the pulley, and, you know, he didn't have to go to hospital or anything. But come on.
Yeah.
Like, this is like basic set building stuff. And so just from that, I was like, I don't want to have my name attached to this in any way. But then I actually sat through a performance.
Oh, yes.
And I didn't know that this was, no one had told me what the name of the show was. I didn't look it up. I was just going to show up and hit the buttons. And then it's called Comfort Women, a New Musical, which is the worst
Yes.
byline ever. Like, why? Just call it Comfort Women. Like,
Yeah.
that's easy, you know?
Call it that.
But then it turns into this, like, jaunty, like, mostly, like, feel-good
It was horrific.
musical about sex slavery. What?
Yeah.
Why would anyone make that choice?
If it was just a play,
Right.
maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It could have been just a play, and I think it still wouldn't have been that great, but at least
Yeah.
I could give it some respect.
Just the singing and the dancing involved around sex slavery and rape and just like these horrific things and like such a huge trauma
which
from war.
which never gets resolved in the end.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone dies, and that's
Yes.
it.
And
No resolution.
a lot of one-dimensional Japanese people
Yes.
who are just
Just monsters.
just evil,
Yeah.
evil monster people who rape women.
Right. Except for the one guy who's on the Japanese side, who's not Japanese, he's Korean.
Oh yes, that man. And
Right.
the weird romance undertone where I was
Yeah,
like,
why did that have to be in there?
no romance if she's literally a sex slave.
Right.
No. You're like the only person who's seen this show. I remember
I saw it
bringing
like
up.
14 times. Yeah.
I saw it 14 times.
Yeah. And the first time I saw it, the producer actually came. He's like, "So what do you think?" Oh, boy. I have a hard time lying to people. But I also have a harder time being brutally honest with people.
Yeah.
So I was just like, you did it, that it's on stage, you know, like total non-answer. And then I just avoided him for weeks because he watched every single show. And yeah.
The only thing is only like white liberals like that show. Because I went with,
Oh, really? I didn't know anyone who did like it.
I just remember leaving in my out of body state, leaving the audience and being like, I don't know what I just saw and I'm not comfortable with it. It was like triggering and like just
Yeah.
a lot of things happening. And just like I was hearing like all these people being like, wow, so powerful. I never knew this happened during World War II, mostly from white audiences. And I'm just like, yeah, it was just such a surreal show. And you're literally the first person I have been like, have you seen this? You've seen it? Oh my God,
No,
can we
I
like
worked
share
on
it?
And so me walking in, and so the guy I was subbing for is a white dude from Maine. He's the only white dude in the crew, which is just like happenstance that they don't like go out looking for technicians that are specific races. He just happened to work for the theater, and this is the show that came in.
Yeah.
But like for me to stumble into this thing where everyone around me is an Asian American theater artist, like, holy crap, this has never happened to me ever before.
Yeah.
My entire career, I've always been the token Asian person.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, there's like some Asian people in the cast, but never on the technical side.
Yeah.
So that was cool and promising, and then
That's
totally disillusioned.
I was still in, or did I finish drama school already? It was one of those, but it was one of those things where I was like, is this what I'm going to pursue? That
Right.
was kind of what I was thinking. Like, is this the type of work that's out there for us?
So the lesson that we should learn from this
Yeah.
is that those people who made that show took their destiny into their own hands. They made that themselves.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why we couldn't do that.
Yeah. Which is empowering in its own way. They had a vision,
Right.
got on stage.
Yeah. But I also feel like, as artists, we have a responsibility to
Yeah.
really think about what it is that we're making and why. More importantly, I think for them, they wanted to capitalize on people love musicals. They're trying to make money. I don't think that they really had a good message in mind, with that thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to, really think about those things and constantly remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing, instead of just like, well, I work in theater, so I might as well just do another play, like
Yes.
I should have, a mission, I guess.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is why I sort of just stopped acting after school. I was just like, I was under this disillusion that like there is nothing that I would want to put myself in, that I would be because I just saw Cover Women and I was like, oh my God, there's this. But then Crazy Rich Asians did come out, and that like
I haven't
did
seen it yet.
Oh my God.
When I was listening to the previous episodes of your podcast, I was like, I had texted my roommate, like, have you seen this movie yet? Because it's definitely in her wheelhouse.
It's so good.
I mean, she's a white girl, but like she mostly dates Asian men. It's not a yellow fever thing. It's just mostly all men of color she's into.
Yeah.
But she just happens to hang out with Asian people a lot. And I'm like, have you seen this? She's like, no, but I think maybe I should. I'm like, I think I probably should watch this too. So maybe this afternoon.
You should watch it. It instilled a lot of hope in me. Just this one movie alone was just like, yeah, maybe like I should do it and it will be okay and things will be better. Like I said, the stairwell we met in, that was like very out of the blue and unexpected for me too. But it was a good, I mean, it's not over yet, but it was a good experience too, of being like, oh, not everyone is going to token me. I don't think, at least I didn't feel that way.
Yeah. No. That Nick's show has no hint of that at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What was your experience? I actually experienced it the first time last Friday, and I ugly cried. It was
watching
so
the show?
unexpected, because I was like, oh, I know what goes on in most of these rooms from like hearing about it. And I was with Christina.
Oh yeah.
And
Hers
I don't
is so
know what happened, but I was
comforting.
like sobbing. And then the next room I went in was
in the closet.
in the closet.
Oh,
and
yeah,
of course I'm
that's
like
good.
sobbing as someone is holding me.
I wasn't sobbing, but I definitely felt a release
Yes.
of, whatever it was that had been building up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was intense.
Yeah, and maybe you can explain it better than me what this show is. Because I've tried to explain it to people, and I think they just kind of stare at me like, I don't know what you're saying. But it's an immersive play. 7 actors have one-on-one performances for a few minutes.
5.
Is it 5? It's 5 actors for 7 minutes each.
Yes.
That's what it is. And it's about intimacy and, relationships and betrayal and all the complications that go with those things. But it's also very intimate. There's a lot of touching. And Jay, who was there on her first day, she had the scene in the stairs where you're slow dancing. And it's funny, afterwards we went to the bar and we were talking about it, and she clocked me as being a total nerd in middle school. She's like, because you're squirming so much. And I'm like, yeah, it's like that scene took me straight back to middle school when I was in Boy Scouts, and the local Girl Scout troop and us met up because they were going to teach us ballroom dancing. And I was totally, like, as a 13-year-old, not prepared. Didn't know, like, how to behave, so nervous. And, like, this took me straight back to that. And it was, like, a nice feeling because I haven't experienced that, like, weird nervousness in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely felt really, I don't even know, when I experienced it, it was like I just felt like I could be fully myself and
Right.
fully immersed in that experience and very intimate with people. And I think that's why I ugly cried, because like Christina asked a series of questions where I was answering very truthfully, and I was like, it's a total stranger. But I don't know what it was about that experience where I was like, yeah, I could totally talk to these strangers about how I feel about relationships and love and my father and things like that. I think my scene in particular, I just get looks of disappointment. And I was talking to Nick about it, and Nick was saying it's because it becomes an inward question of like, would I do the same thing if I were stuck in a boring, long relationship, which most relationships do turn into these boring, routine things, and it's no longer fun and exciting anymore. So even that scene alone, I like questioned a lot about my own relationship. Not questioned my relationship,
Right,
but those questions did come up of like, yeah,
like
sometimes
become a little more contemplative.
Yeah. But we are running out of time. Is there anything you want to plug in your own work, or anything you want listeners to take away from everything we talked about, from magic or building bridges with people in rural America?
Oh, so rural America. I was in Idaho in the Panhandle. Some clowns from Ringling own a...
I thought you were like talking about like clowns, like people, like these punk ass kids.
No, some Ringling clowns. They own a whitewater rafting expedition resort out in the wilderness. And it's like 100 miles to the closest cell tower, that sort of thing. So we're out there hanging out with them on their property for a few days. And one of them brings up that the local university did this archaeological dig out in the woods a few months earlier, because there was I don't want to say secret, but like obscure Japanese internment camp out there. It was so remote that they didn't even have fences there, because it was on the Lolo Pass, which is actually where Lewis and Clark had their expedition out to the Pacific. They went right through that river. But yeah, it was this internment camp where they actually put all the men in the camp to work building the highway through that pass that connects Washington to Montana.
Wow.
Yeah. And then once the war was over, once the internment, program ended, they dismantled they dismantled the camp brick by brick so that there was no evidence of it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Kuskia internment camp, if you guys want to look it up.
You should look it up.
And there's a book about it too, which I haven't read yet, sadly. But so we went over there to that site and we dug around. You get a couple inches beneath the surface of the forest floor, and you start pulling out pieces of trash and stuff from the camp, like coffee mugs and dishes. And I found a pair of glasses and a safety razor. I actually use a double-sided safety razor, like 30s, 40s era. I found the same one that I used buried in the dirt, which I cleaned up and I use now because I like to have that connection to history. But like, why? It's not like to call it a cover-up is weird. Why did they dismantle it like this? Why was it hidden? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I have so many feelings, mostly of rage right now.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even learn about Japanese internment camps
I certainly
until
didn't.
high school. Yeah. And to learn about this additional, it is a cover up because of this. It's slave labor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. Wow, that's like a whole other episode we have to talk about.
Yeah, someone please do some research on that. I'll lend them the book. Yeah.
Or come back, and after you're done reading the book, you can come back and share it with us. But wow, that's intense. I'm so sad we have to end.
Yeah.
But anything you want to plug?
No, I guess just my Instagram page, which is Amodt Tech, AMODTTECH. I am also a photographer as well as a theater person. I guess that's it. I'm about to go on tour to Australia in a few weeks,
cool.
which I'm pretty stoked on.
Enjoy
especially to get out of New York winter.
Yes, I wish I were going somewhere to get out of the city. That's so cool. And is there anything you want listeners to take away from the story that you talked about today? It's also okay if there isn't, if it's just like a cool story.
Well, for me, I love history and I love late 19th century stuff, and like the racism and biases just go hand in hand with it. But I think we just shouldn't forget, that these things that we're, dealing with now have always existed.
Yes.
Of course, it was a lot worse 100 years ago. But, just have to be aware of it.
Yes.
Try not to deny these things happened.
Yeah, there's no use in that.
Right.
We can only grow when we learn from it.
Right.
But thank you so much
thanks for
coming,
having me.
Aaron. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for not being creeped out when I was like, you should be on my podcast in that stairwell. And you can find Now in Color on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever, basically.
Yeah.
And find us on Instagram and Now in Color Podcast, Twitter, now_in_color. And this has been recorded at Brick by Brick Studios. And thank you so much for listening. Bye.
See ya.